What is a hero? A mythological figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability? An illustrious warrior? No. It's a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage. Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast, where we dive deep into what a hero is and what makes them that hero. I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter, and I'm going to be introducing you to some of the world's most likely and unlikely heroes. You may have never heard of them before, and they most likely have never met you. But they all have one thing in common. They are ready to do whatever it takes to help make you better, even if it means sacrificing everything for you. Let's get into it. This is episode 46 of the What's a Hero podcast with me, Ken Frownfelter. You know, you think about police officers and first responders and, and vets and everybody being able to, being so smart, they're able to take care of themselves so well that they don't have to think about, their credit score. And they don't have to think about their setting themselves up after they retire and all this different stuff. Those of you that are listening know that that is not necessarily the case. There's so many times in our lives that we might be just going through our career, and when we get to the end of it, when we get to that end of that time of retirement, there are a lot of police officers, a lot of firefighters, a lot of nurses and teachers and veterans who are trying to figure out, what am I going to do now? All I've ever known is how to be a police officer, and that's how I've made my money. Now I got to go try to find something else to do, something I don't know what it is, whether it's, working security at the hospital or doing something along those lines. And we don't always consider our next move. Well, today I've got a guest on who's not only thought about that next move as being a financial coach to help people determine that, but they're also a current police officer, and they have an MA in organizational psychology, which kind of puts a whole bunch of different things on this person's plate by looking at the fact that they know how to be a police officer, they know how to serve other people, they know how to give of their life and their time, but they also understand what it takes to make sure you're set up for your next step. In addition to that, they also understand another side of things, why our brain works the way that it does in order to be able to put things in the order in which they need to go. They're also the wife of I'm assuming it's a former United States Marine, and also an instructor and a subject matter expert on suicide prevention. So this person who I'm about to introduce you to has a wide range of skills and abilities and is willing to talk about all of those. And that is Miss Stephanie Kiesow. How you doing, Stephanie?
I am great. Thanks, Ken.
So I pronounced your last name correctly, I'm assuming?
Close. It's Kiesow, but that's quite all right.
You see, I always mess it up. If somebody's going to mess it up, yeah, it's going to be me. So you're all those things that I mentioned. You're police officer, certified financial coach. You have an MA in organizational psychology. You're the wife. Is your husband a current or former Marine?
He's actually in the reserves.
So he's a current.
Yeah. He did 8 years doing embassy security and other stuff that I don't entirely understand, but now he's in the reserves.
So I mean, he's home more often, which is good.
That's true. Yeah. And my dad's also a retired Marine. So got to give an oorah for you guys out there.
Yeah, there you go. And so you've been a police officer for a day or two. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've been a police officer for a handful of years. But prior to that, I was a 911 dispatcher for quite a few years and worked for 3 different police departments since 2006. And, I got to say, I absolutely love being a part of the the sworn world. But when I was a dispatcher, that's a tough job. That's one of the toughest jobs I've had. So I gotta give mad respect for the dispatchers out there holding the shit down. Because
Right.
oh wait, can I say shit?
You can say whatever you want to say.
I totally said shit. But yeah, that was a great job, and a tough one at that. So I got to give kudos to those.
Yeah, I've had a couple of dispatchers on here, and they, there's a point where they don't realize all the stuff that they do. The good, everything that comes across their screen that they do, and then across, their eyes, everything that they do, and then they don't get a lot of respect. And so I would agree with you. They absolutely are respected in my estimation. So where did who was little Stephanie? I always like to go back to who everybody was. Do we call you little Steph? What do we call you back then when you were trying to figure out the world?
I was actually little T. My dad was big T, because I'm second generation law enforcement. Both my folks are cops. My dad's retired. My mom has a few years away from retirement. So I was little T, he was big T. And for a short time, we worked for the same department, but, and then my husband is a current sheriff's deputy. So as you can imagine, 4 cops around the dinner table for the holidays makes for some great conversation.
Sure. Yeah.
It's so bad. Our poor family and friends who aren't in law enforcement, they look at us like we've lost our minds with some of the conversations we've had.
Well, yeah, there's the dark humor, there's the dark stories, there's the inside jokes. I get it. Yep. Yeah. Yep. So, who were you? What'd you do when you were little? Were you outside running around? You'd like to sit inside, watch TV all day, read books, play the trombone? What was your thing?
No trombone. I was very much into animals, which is translated into my life now. I've got a menagerie of animals. I've got 2 dogs, a cat, a horse, a flock of chickens, a 5-year-old, and one on the way. So I guess they're sort of in there too.
Yeah.
So they keep me busy. But yeah, growing up, it was just, being a child of a cop, but especially of 2. I had a pretty straight-laced upbringing. And I grew up really fast because, my parents were busy working shift work, working overtime. And my brother and I, we sort of had to find a way to fend for ourselves in a lot of respects. So, but it made me into the person that I am today. So I definitely can't complain.
Right. So obviously your parents were they police officers your whole childhood?
My dad was, and then my mother became a police officer when I was in high school.
Okay. And so was it always going towards that angle, knowing that, hey, I'm going to go be a police officer? Or did you have thoughts of other stuff?
Honestly, I had zero interest in being affiliated with the law enforcement world growing up. I wanted to be a vet because of my animal love. But once I found out how much math was involved, I was like, I really don't like math that much. Right. So plan B for me. So I ended up working as a cadet for my hometown police agency while I was going through college. And that sort of gave me, the foot in the door. And I saw how much I really loved it. I loved being a part of that world aside from my parents. And I really loved making a name for myself with my colleagues and just being a part of that tribe.
Right. And it's weird. I've actually had several guests on here who have started out that way and realized, wow, that's what I wanted to do. Or they had other plans going through school and figuring, hey, I want to go do this or go do that. And then all of a sudden different stuff happened. And it was just, they found that love for, police work and the team and the camaraderie and all that stuff like that. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So were you going through were you taking classes for vet stuff? Or was it once you realized that, you put everything on the back burner and said, I'm going to go towards law enforcement?
So I actually got my bachelor's in psychology because I knew I wanted to do something in the law enforcement world, but I didn't at that time know what. So I got my bachelor's in psychology and ended up becoming a dispatcher initially, which was my first full-time gig in law enforcement before going the sworn route. So I did that for 2 different.
Was it your intent to stay to go be a dispatcher, or would you have the intent of becoming a police officer at some point?
I went into it having the intent to be a dispatcher, but then once I became a dispatcher, I realized, I feel like I could be doing more. I feel like there's more help that I could be offering than just being behind the headset and the phone. As much as I loved it, I just felt like I could offer more.
Right. Well, that's cool. Did you find that the fact that you had this psychology degree, did it help in your ability to dispatch, to talk to people, or did you find that it was kind of being, you could have, like you said, you could have been doing more, but was it enough, or was it, there could have been more to it, or what?
I definitely think that it definitely behooved my profession, not only in dispatch, but as an officer too. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a medical professional by any means, but just having that foundation of understanding to a certain extent the crisis that oftentimes people are having when they have those interactions with the police, whether it be on the phone or in person.
Right.
Just that foundational understanding has really helped. And what to say, how to say it, how to be helpful with certain situations. It definitely helped. And I think because I had that foundational piece, I was pretty good at it, which made me enjoy it all the more.
Right.
But like I said, I just felt like sitting inside, I wanted to be out there. I wanted to be the physically helping people and the one that rolled up on scene and offered help first before anybody else got there. So.
Right. I mean, as much as being able to take that call and being able to tell somebody that, hey, help is on the way, you might, it's a lot. There's a part of it that being that help that is on the way, and then actually showing up kind of makes a little bit more of a difference, at least personally. And I'm not saying in the grand scheme of things, I'm talking about, for everybody, because there's some people who are very content. I know a lot of dispatchers who are very content being the answering the phone, and they know that their skill set is not in going to the scene, but their skill set is talking to the person on the phone, getting the help going, and all that sort of thing. So there's two sides of it, and it's just a total different thing. Did you you went to school specifically for that, and then when you graduated school you started becoming you went and became a dispatcher, or was it while you were doing it, or beforehand, or what?
No, I got my bachelor's, and then I applied to be a dispatcher with a different agency than where I was working at the time. Got hired, and then I went through a dispatch academy, which is similar to the police academy, but just much more tailored down and
Sure.
much more abbreviated. So I did that, and then was on training for another 6 months, and graduated from that. Was on my own for a while, and the department that I worked for was a really busy department, especially on nights and weekends. I mean, our 911 phone would ring constantly nonstop, and we had multiple on the phones and multiple people on the radios doing 2 radio channels for police and one channel for fire. And we were rocking and rolling some weekends. It was fun.
Nice. And so you're a dispatcher, you're doing that, and you said you did that for about 3 years, and then you realize, okay, I'm gonna ramp this up a little bit, and how was that transition?
Well, honestly, I sort of fell into it. I was working at the time. I had sort of downsized professionally because I had my first son, and I was working part-time as a dispatcher. And because of some unfortunate events that took place, I saw myself going through a divorce, and working part-time doesn't pay the bills, especially
Sure.
when you have a toddler. And so I realized that it was sort of now or never. I wanted to be a police officer. I really loved the department that I worked for at that time. And as hard as I knew it was going to be going through the academy as a divorced mom of a toddler, I knew that that was going to give me the extra motivation to see it through. So that's ultimately what put me through.
There you go. And so when you brought this information up, did your parents already know that this is something that you were looking at doing, or when you brought it up, was it something that you guys had to have a conversation about? And I mean, and I know that as an adult with kids and stuff, you can make your own decisions and you're a liberated woman. I get it. However, there's still a side that your parents are going to, they're going to be verbal, especially if you've allowed them into your life, you have a solid relationship with them, that they're still going to have something to say about it. Whether you take that and listen to it or you throw it away, they still had something to say. What was their take on it?
Yeah, I think they both were supportive, but them being a part of the law enforcement world and seeing what they saw, I think, there was a little bit of worry, a little bit of fear, maybe hesitation for seeing your child about to go into the world of policing, the crazy world that is. And this was prior to COVID. This was prior to a lot of the civil unrest that we're seeing today.
Right.
And so back then they had some reservations. Little did they know how bad it was going to get, but
right. They always talk about, they always talk about that pendulum swinging back and forth, and and they say it's over to the left a lot right now, and so that pendulum is eventually going to swing back in our favor. And because I know people who have sat there and said, I never thought it would get this far, and that pendulum is kind of swinging pretty far over the left, and how far can it get over there? And but and when I say the pendulum swinging, it's our favor, and not necessarily to make it easy for us, but that there are court cases and things like this that will that'll come about that aren't necessarily in our favor. You have various case law and whatever, where we have to now change the way that we police because of that whole thing. And so, it's always been and always will be just a fluid course of action that we are always having to navigate through.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a good way to put it.
So when you start saying, okay, I'm going to go, you got to go through the police academy and everything. Is that your police academy? Was that a live there, or did you get to come home in the evening, or is it, how'd that work?
So ours was 6 months. We did not have to live on site. So what I ended up doing was I rented a room from a friend in the town where the academy was, and did that on the weekdays. Weekends, I spent time with my son and did that for about 6 months.
Very cool. And I'm assuming your parents supported you and helped you out through this whole endeavor?
I had a terrific support system, which really made a difference. My parents, my ex-husband, I mean, although, we divorced, we're still good friends to this day. And so, so he was a good support system, and definitely helped taking our son when I needed to study or sleep the 1.5 hours I got a night, or whatever the
I think that's something that we forget also, is that if you're younger and you're getting ready to start this career, or you're starting this career, if you don't have a support system, and those people who have retired and who or are in this, if you don't have a support system going into this, being in this, and afterwards, it's gonna be difficult. Now, you could do this if it's just you and you're a single person or whatever, and you're just going through it, it's possible, it's doable, and it's all that stuff like that. But once you have a whole bunch of other little portions, or you have any kind of pushback of any kind, having that support system really makes a difference, especially as you're going through FTEP or something like that, where you are now at that point where you need to, you're struggling and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know who to bounce this idea or this information off of. And if you don't have anybody there to do that with, it makes it extremely difficult. So yeah, having a support system really makes a difference. I don't know a single officer who has not had a good solid support system that has been able to do this. So
absolutely.
So you get into it, you're now a police officer, and you're doing this whole thing where you realize you're doing the thing that you wanted to do. You didn't realize how much you wanted to do it until now you're doing it. And this is it, huh? And
Sort of.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I graduated the academy, got through training. I loved helping people, whatever variation of that there was.
Mm-hmm.
Helping people is very much so God's purpose for me.
Sure.
And so, I did that for a few years. But I just sort of naturally gravitated towards helping people in a different way, aside from my police gig, because of the experiences that I went through financially, and then also seeing my colleagues struggle with their finances and how much that affected their mental health. So I sort of fell into this role of helping other people with their finances. And then I thought, there's a lot of people out there that I feel like I can help in this area too. So that's sort of what set me along the path of becoming a certified financial coach, was seeing that there was this need in the first responder community, in the military community. And I think, naturally, especially us in law enforcement, we're naturally a suspicious and untrusting bunch, right?
Right.
We aren't very trusting, especially in the beginning with people. And so I wanted to be sort of that conduit between helping people with their finances, but also showing them that I have that cultural competence, mm-hmm. that I've lived in the world that they're in, and I get it and I understand it, and I've been where they're at, and
right.
things change. Right. And so I sort of fell into it. I didn't necessarily have this idea in mind initially, but now that I'm doing it sort of as a side thing, aside from my normal police duties, I really love it. It really fills my cup.
So you look at how people are doing in I guess their day-to-day stuff that they're doing, and then you start seeing that people are, they're not necessarily taking care of their finances the way as well as they could, and you start trying to figure out that whole thing. Is that what it was that you start seeing people are struggling and you realize, hey, I have a penchant for that, I can help do that? Or did you go and say, hey, I'm gonna go become this because I just have an interest in money and numbers and stuff like that? I mean, because you said math wasn't your thing.
Yeah, right? Isn't that so ironic?
Yeah.
No, I think it was sort of a combination of different events. I think because I've been pretty open about my experiences, mm-hmm. with financial wellness or lack thereof, that, I would have colleagues and people come to me and say, I'm really struggling with this, or, especially with our partners, we can sense when something is off. And right. So talking to them and be like, hey, what's up? What you're different today. What's going on in your world? And then mm-hmm. them confide that they're having marital issues because of money or whatever the case may be. It sort of just kind of evolved in that sense. I didn't like go out and be like, hey guys, I can help with money. And, I'm here.
Right.
Like
Sure.
It just evolved. But, and again, I'm not a psychologist or medical professional by any means, but I think most of us, if not all of us, can relate that there's, certain financial issues that can contribute to stress and anxiety, and even perhaps depression or suicidal thoughts.
Right.
That financial piece can be a contributing factor to all of that. So when you combine those feelings with an already stressful and sometimes traumatic job like the one that we're in, it can have devastating effects at times.
Absolutely. You're talking about how you start noticing people are a little bit, they're not their normal selves or whatever, and you're able to go and I've talked about that with several other people, and the thing that I always notice is that if you have a relationship with somebody, you're able to see that a little bit sooner, and that's why those are so important with the world that we live in and everything else, and the world that we work in. That if we don't have those relationships, if we don't have those people that care about us and we care about, we're not going to see those things. And then what are we doing this for? So like you said, the fact that you're on this planet to help other people, to do things for other people, the fact that God put you here for that reason really makes a difference, because I firmly believe that our job on this planet, if you say what's life, what's the meaning of life? Well, the meaning of life is service to others, and to be here for other people. And we're not supposed to be hermits, and we're not supposed to go live up in the mountains by ourselves, and that sort of thing. Where our job, our place on this planet, is to go do things for other people. And if we can determine that there's people that we have included in our lives, and that we include ourselves into theirs, that they need help, that we should be there to help them. And just like going back to the support system, having a support system proves that we're able to flourish. Being that support system for somebody else will help other people to flourish too. And I think it's really important that we remember that. And the fact that you did that, and that you're looking at it like, I'm not here because I know everything about money they'll ever know. I'm the next Robert Kiyosaki or anything. That's not what you're saying. What you're saying is that, hey, you know what? I see this need, and I see this ability that I have, and let's help get to it. Because it's financial coaching, not financial. You're not an accountant or something like that. It's coaching. And so let's take a high school coach for a football or volleyball or whatever team. They probably never played in the NFL, but they know enough about it to say, hey, this is what you need to do. We need to go here so we can try to win some games. And that's basically what you're doing, I would assume, correct?
Yes, that's a great way to put it. Yes. I'm not an investor. I'm not an accountant. A lot of what comes along with financial coaching is helping with behavior modification, helping to set goals, and finding the motivation to go and accomplish those goals is what I help clients with. So I'm sort of a unofficial cheerleader, I guess.
Okay. And kind of point everybody in the direction like, hey, it's probably best that you don't, do Starbucks every single day. You might.
Yes.
And you can kind of put things in perspective as far as, okay, here's your weekly spending habits, and here's your giant percentage that goes to Starbucks. Maybe you can whittle that down a little bit.
Yeah, that's not uncommon, especially with us. Our caffeine addiction is definitely there.
Oh, that's for sure. And especially those that work that in the later shifts, the graveyards or whatever, it's just so brutal that that's the only thing. Because and I noticed this, is that you're just chasing the sleep. That's all graveyard is, you do your job. Yeah. But when you're not working, you're chasing the sleep, and, you want to, I got to get up and work out. I got to do whatever. Nope. You still chase the sleep, and I'm going to try to get my next nap in. I got to try to. And so it's not always helpful to do that, but.
Yeah. And what I found too is, and I experienced this with my own experiences of being in debt and having financial struggles. But I think us in law enforcement, we're professional problem solvers. Mm-hmm. So we try to problem solve our own problems. And oftentimes it's, well, let me calculate how much overtime I need to work this month to make ends meet, instead of looking at it like, hey, what can I cut? What fat can I trim? What should I not be doing?
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of fell into that, which, if you're working any shift, it's exhausting. But if you're working graveyards and you're pulling an extra 2-3 overtime shifts a week or a month, that's exhausting.
Oh yeah.
That's exhausting. Burnout is real. So, that's the other part to this too, is, I want to be able to help people spend more time with their families, or have time for their hobbies, or sleep well,
Right.
and not have to worry about that financial piece, or feeling like they're stuck and having to work a shit ton of overtime just to make it.
Right. Because I think we lose that sometimes when we are working all that overtime and we're going to court, because that's the other side of things, is that we have things that we don't have control of, the court dates, the grand jury, or whatever the case may be. And then there's always special events that go on around holidays and everything else in the summertime, and there's always that opportunity. However, we lose that ability if we to be ourselves and find out who we are, if all we're doing is always working. And like you said, those hobbies are so important, and that if we lose that ability to have a hobby, what's our hobby? And a lot of people, I don't really do much. You got to find something to do, whether it's woodworking, or playing a musical instrument or something like that. But if you're not doing those things, what's the point in who you are? And because you can't always be your job, you got to be you, and your job is just something you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, and I went through that. I mean, after I graduated the police academy, and I was going through training, I was sort of just struggling through life. And between my divorce, that working part-time before the academy, and just not really having the greatest financial skills at the time, I had about $40,000 worth of debt, which for what I was making was a lot of money. And my credit cards were maxed out. I was driving a car that had a high monthly payment. I had a personal loan from a family member that, from a psychological perspective, I hated, because I hated having to owe money to a family member.
Right. Yeah.
But I was just so stressed, and stressed aside from just the normal day in and day out of being a cop and going through field training. So I camped in this area of stress, morning, noon, and night. That was essentially my existence. And I sort of hit rock bottom. A little bit after that, I was walking my son around the mall on a rainy day, just to get some exercise and sort of entertain him. And he wanted one of those mall pretzels, those delicious, probably awful small pretzels, calorie laden, salty. So he wanted one of those. And with all my debt, the rest of my checking account, what little was in there was earmarked for the rest of my bills, and my credit cards were all maxed out, and I couldn't afford to pay $4 for a pretzel for my son. $4. I was so broke, I couldn't afford a $4 pretzel.
Man.
So I went home, and after I put him to bed, sort of had a meltdown on my kitchen floor, had a coming to Jesus moment there. And, I did what most of us in law enforcement do. Like I said, I tried to do the numbers and calculate how much overtime I needed. And I did that a while, but I got burnt out, and I worked so much, but didn't have a lot to show for it, because at that time I didn't do any behavior modifications around money. So I basically was spending as much as I was making. Everything that came in just went right back out. And at that time, my department was going through some pretty significant internal turmoil. And so being at work was the last place anybody wanted to be, including myself.
Right.
But I just felt stuck. I felt like I didn't have a choice. I had to work extra to be able to pay the bills, which that stuck feeling for me was just as depressing as not being able to buy a $4 pretzel. That was a tough feeling.
Yep.
So I went along with that plan for a while, but then I ended up getting so sick of it that one night I Googled how to get out of debt. And this plan named the Dave Ramsey plan popped up. And around this time, I was dating a new guy, a wonderful guy who eventually would become my current husband. But as much as I wanted to throw myself into this new relationship, I knew I needed to get my life in order for myself and my son. So I knew that I needed to focus on this financial piece that I was not doing very well at. I was not very successful at. So I worked the plan, baby steps, as they're called. And within a little over a year, I paid off my $40,000 debt, all of it.
Nice.
And yeah, and you know, the feeling that came afterwards, this freedom, this weight being lifted off of my chest, it was so transformative, Ken. Like I can't even describe it. I slept better. I was able to focus on my family. I actually had the energy and the mental capacity to love people around me and do the things that I wanted to do. I was able to travel. I could donate. You know, I had extra money to actually donate to charities that I cared about. All the things that I've been wanting to do, I could finally do. And so sort of fast forward, you know, this guy and I dated for a few years, and after he paid off his debts, because I refused to go backwards, so I told him, you got to get your shit together. Things are going to happen here. We got married, and we actually got married during the beginning of COVID, of all things, which was sort of a bummer in the beginning, but in all honesty, it really helped us because with COVID, you know, we didn't want to drop thousands upon thousands of dollars to potentially be quarantined if we went out of state or out of the country, or, you know, our guests having to wear masks and things like that. So instead of this big extravagant wedding and honeymoon, we ended up buying our first home with a good sized down payment. There you go. And then on top of that, we were able to cash flow around $20,000 extra just for, you know, closing costs, taxes, new home stuff, which really put us in a good financial plan. And so it was because of that trajectory that I had to go through. I realized the help that I could offer other people. And so I went through the certification to become a Ramsey certified financial coach, with the full intention of helping other people feel that peace that I felt. That peace was just such a huge thing. It was so transformative for me. And so that's sort of why I got into it in the first place, was my experiences and my struggles.
Right. You know, and that's a fantastic story that I think a lot of people can relate to, because I don't know how many people, I mean, myself included, where you go through a time where you just feel like, oh my gosh, I've got all these things coming. Because let's admit it, let's agree that when we're young, we're stupid. And I don't know anybody that says, you know, I never had any issues, and I was great from the get-go, and I was always doing fine. Yeah. Because we all have gone through that time where we're struggled through something. And so having that ability to take the fact that you owed money, because when we're young, we think, hey, I can borrow this money and I got all this time to pay it back. And then that weight that it develops, that you're like, oh my gosh, I got this credit card, or I've got this car payment, or I've got this, you know, whatever. And, you know, whether you have that car payment, because I know people that have car payments, or they have whatever payments, and they don't even have the thing anymore, but they still have the payment on it. And that's a huge weight when you can get that weight off, where you don't owe somebody money anymore. It's a lot like a lot of people that I talk to at work who have warrants or something like that. And then when, you know, they say, hey, I'm doing good, I'm clean, I've got so many clean days, and I don't have warrants anymore. And then all of a sudden you're like, it's nice not having to look over your shoulder, right? And they're like, oh, it's so nice. And so that's the same. It's a very similar thing. I'm not going to say that it's the exact same, but that you don't have that weight that is always sitting on your shoulders saying, hey, you owe this person this much money, and you owe this person, and you owe this credit card company, and you owe that stuff. And that weight just going away is a huge thing. And especially now that you can say, hey, I can buy a $4 pretzel and not even worry about it.
Yeah, it definitely served as the catalyst in my life that I needed. I needed to go through that storm to be
Mhm.
able to help others go through
Mhm.
their storms.
Right.
Because without it, I wouldn't have that ability to relate to where they're at. Right.
Right.
I wouldn't be able to understand or empathize or sympathize. So I really had to go through that to be able to help others. And looking back, I would do it 100 times over if it meant I can help one person. So
That,
it was
yeah, that's cool. And so now you're certified coach to be able to do that. And I'm assuming now that you do that, everything is always easy all the time. When it comes to money for yourself, you never have issues. And
yeah, yeah. My chuckles in the background is a resounding no.
yeah,
You know, I don't think there's just like, our professions, we're never going to feel like we have it all figured out.
right.
There's never not going to be a scenario where you're like, well, I've been there, done that. There's always going to be something that we're going to have to learn, always something that's going to pop up that we've never experienced. And there's no difference with our finances. But I think the difference is with a plan, it's less stressful.
Mhm.
And setting yourself up now so you can retire, so you can pay cash for a car, so you can buy a $4 pretzel. When those storms do come, they're just sort of mild inconveniences instead of full-on emergencies.
Right.
So it makes them easier to go through. And from a psychological perspective too, which is a big piece of why I do what I do to help others.
Mhm.
Just that stress, that removal of the stress that you feel around money is gone when you have a
Right.
plan,
Right.
when you budget. So that's a really big piece. And you I unfortunately have experienced this in my life, not directly, but sort of indirectly. I was dating a guy about a decade or so ago now, who was a close friend before we were dating, and
Mhm.
he was a police officer for a city that we grew up in. So we, had known each other for a long time and
Mhm.
had a history. But long story short, he was in a nasty IA, which contributed to a lot of his stressors, and then he also had financial struggles,
Mhm.
which contributed to his stressors. And ultimately, he decided one night on patrol to kill himself on duty with his duty weapon.
Mhm.
And that obviously was a big life event for me.
Sure. Yeah.
Losing him was very hard. I think that goes without saying, but I think what was just as hard was my guilt associated with his dying by suicide.
Mm.
My guilt of not seeing some of the warning signs as warning signs, but
Mhm.
also the guilt of not knowing what to do with some of the warning signs that I did see, like his financial struggles that he confided to me about. Like at the time, I didn't know what to do with that information. I didn't have that knowledge
Right.
at the time, so I didn't do anything. And it's hard not to think that contributed to his tragic end of
Mhm.
someone special to me. So aside from and then also too, like colleagues, like I mentioned, like colleagues struggling with financial things, just the stress, you can see it in your partners.
Yeah.
And if you talk to them, money can affect their mental health and their marriages and just their spirit in general. So that's sort of why I continued with my psychology education and got my master's, was because I not only wanted to study this building resiliency and wellness, but I also wanted to study motivation and goal setting
Right.
and helping people see the light at the end of the tunnel, because I wanted to be prepared for the next time. The next time someone I cared about came to me, being vulnerable with me. But This time it's going to be different because I have a foundational knowledge to hopefully help them find hope
Right.
and a way to improve their situation.
Right.
So that psychology piece is really big too.
Yeah. And I think that's, you mentioned those red flags, those things that are popping up, and I've said it, we spoke about it on here a little bit ago. Those relationships that we have with people, those are going to be the telltales. That's how we know who everybody is and where they're at and all that different stuff. But what are, in your estimation, what are the red flags, not necessarily in that specific scenario, but what are some red flags that people can be looking out for in people, whether it is something that's suicidal, or if it's just something, they're struggling otherwise? Because you're also, in addition to having your bachelor's in psychology and stuff like that, and being a money guru, I'm gonna go with money guru right now. Well, let's say budget guru. We'll go with that.
I like it.
There's another side that you work on wellness, and you speak towards wellness and all that stuff, different stuff. What are some red flags that people can be looking out for in the grand scheme of things, not just financially, but overall, that you've noticed in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about this for hours. And this is actually one of the subjects that I help to teach through Post and STC with a great guy, great retired police chief named Rick Wall. Mm-hmm. But I think the two biggest things is a difference in behavior, mm-hmm. and a thing that we call leakage. And leakage, as an example, would be, someone who sent a text message, Ken, we've always been close. You've been a great friend. I just want to say I really appreciate all you've done for me. And you're reading it and you're like, okay, this is a really nice message, but it's kind of weird. It's kind of out of the blue.
Right.
That combined with differences in behavior, differences in personality, could be leakage. It could be them unintentionally or perhaps intentionally trying to tell you something. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I've known of many instances where that has occurred, but that text message went out to 10 people in the department. And when the 10 people in the department realize that they each got that same text message, oftentimes, tragically, it's too late. Mm. So I think just looking out for any sort of leakage, them telling you that something's up indirectly, plus mm-hmm. them just acting different, being different. If they're normally an optimistic, bubbly, happy-go-lucky person, and the last few weeks they haven't been, that's right. Definitely something to talk to them about.
And that would
figure out what's up.
And that would be outside of something else happening. I mean, obviously, somebody's, a family member passes away or something like that. They're going to be sad for a couple of weeks or whatever, sure. Based off of that. So if there's a reason for it, that's one thing. But if just out of the blue, like you said, they get a text or they're acting this way out of the blue for no reason, then there's some red flags to be looking at, and there's some reasons to be asking, you doing good? Hey, let's go get a cup of coffee. Let's go get a beer, whatever. Mm-hmm. That's a different story. But I don't know anything that's going on, and all of a sudden this person's no longer their happy-go-lucky self, that's something to be looking for, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. You said it very well. Yeah. And I did experience this in my situation. The night before my boyfriend did what he did, he texted me, and we were, arguing about something, something dumb, I'm sure, like most other couples argue. Mm-hmm. But he went out of his way to make amends. And at the time, it didn't make sense to me, mm-hmm. or I didn't see it as this indication of what he was thinking. But after the fact, it was very clear that he had reached out to myself and other people to try to make amends before he did what he was going to do.
trying to do that closure thing and trying to tie up loose ends and
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Absolutely.
would be kind of something that you don't think about, because it takes you by surprise because you don't realize it. This is kind of weird, but okay, I guess we're thinking of the positive. But I think also as as police officers, we don't realize that, you know, that we're the ones that sometimes that could be our cup is over full, and that
Mhm.
we need to do something to get it empty.
Mhm.
But um we tend to want to be the one that's always helping, and we want to be the one. And so when somebody say, I'm doing this, okay, great, that's odd, but yeah, just, and then we also don't want to be seen as the weak ones. We also don't want to be seen as somebody that, you know, is unable to do whatever, or unable to handle the pressure. But um, something that has been brought to my attention recently with people that I know is that, you know, as far as police officers, our job is help and take care of things. And we get called to go help people with their problems, whether it's domestic issues or their, you know, whatever issue that they've got going on. We go there, we go help them, we help fix their issues, and that's what we do. We fix their issues. So what I've noticed is that police officers will also not be the ones, we don't want to be looked as being somebody that needs the help. However, in a roundabout sort of way, our job is to help take care of people, and
Mhm.
we help handle those issues. And so if we have those relationships with people, we go in and we need to go help, and we need to be willing to step forward and say, hey, how can I help you do this? And then we need to make things uncomfortable, because how often do we make things uncomfortable? Which is quite often. But maybe we need to go get in there and say, look, I care about you, and I, you know, you're my brother, you're my sister, I want to make sure you're safe. And you know, a lot of times we don't have that mindset that we're going to open ourselves up and be that way. However, if you are getting things like this out of the blue, like you're talking about, that's somebody screaming for help. Would you
Mhm.
agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I tell people oftentimes is you can't pour from an empty cup.
Right.
We as professional helpers are going to find it very difficult to help others if our cup is empty. And
Hmm.
that doesn't just go for citizens out on the street. That goes for our families, our kids,
Hmm.
our parents. You know, we don't have, oftentimes we don't have the mental capacity or the energy to love people right or help people
Yeah.
if we are so burnt out and we can't take care of ourselves first.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And you know, there's the other side of that. There's the dichotomy where you also can't help anybody if your cup is so full that you don't have anything to be able to take in. You know,
Mm-hmm.
somebody's gonna unload. Well, where are they gonna unload it to if your cup is full? So you need to carry that balance, that half empty, half full cup, where you, and no matter how you look at it, whether you want to be positive, a pessimist, or a what's the opposite of that? I blinked on it. Nevertheless, but it doesn't matter. You know, you have to have some. You got to have the balance there. And if you're not having the balance, you're going to be going too much in one way, and it's not healthy for anybody, because nobody has anywhere to go with it. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's why I want to be a resource. You know, I want to be a resource that people specific to our line of work can trust and
mm,
know that, you know, there are these resources out there that have their best interest at heart. They can reach out.
right,
It's not weakness to reach out. It's actually strength. So they can work out some kinks, whatever's going on in their life, and live the peace in their life that they so much deserve.
right, right. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. If if we don't do something, you're gonna sit there and you're gonna grow mushrooms. You know, you're just
Mm.
gonna sit and you're not gonna go anywhere. So you have to reach out. You have to be looking for a way out. If you're that person, if you're doing well, if you're doing great, then you need to be keeping your eyes open for people who are struggling, and you need to have relationships with people. You can't be like I said, a hermit to yourself. And so
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
so you're getting in, you go through all this different stuff, and you've determined that you are now a financial coach, and you also want to be there for other people's wellness and stuff like that. How did that develop into who you are and what you're doing? I mean,
I think it sounds kind of silly, but I just sort of fell into it. I don't think I ever really purposefully set out to do the things that I'm doing now. It just
mhm,
sort of evolved naturally. I saw a need and I thought, well, shit, I can't offer a lot of things, but maybe I can offer that one thing, you know?
sure, sure.
So just sort of evolved in that way. And I think, I think because, like you said earlier, it's hard for first responders and military and people in our group, our tribe to reach out.
Right.
I think just putting it out there, like, hey, this is available, I think helps
Mhm,
because
mhm,
at least if they're thinking about reaching out, they know who to reach out to.
right.
Whereas if they don't know who to reach out to, then they're certainly not going to reach out to anyone because they don't know who to trust.
Mhm,
Uh, and another thing that I do is that I'm an ambassador for this thing called Law Enforcement Connect, and it's this group that's doing really awesome things that helps law enforcement, not just sworn but non-sworn as well, transition from the law enforcement world into the civilian world.
mhm,
Because there's a lot of transitional groups and nonprofits for military, but not so much for first responders, for law enforcement.
right.
And so a lot of people that I've talked to within the last few years, because of a lot of things that have been going on in the law enforcement world, they want to plan an exit, but they
Mhm,
either
mhm,
don't feel like they have the financial means to do so, or they don't really know what they would do
right.
to help pay the bills. So the combination of me helping them financially with the exit plan and then Law Enforcement Connect helping them figure out the rest has been a really good marriage of two components that help first responders, especially.
Right. I was talking with Betsy Brantner Smith, and I don't know if you know who she is, but uh, she's fantastic, and she's the wife of Buck Savage, if you're familiar with Buck Savage. But
Yep.
um, and so she and I were having a conversation about when people retire, and just what she was talking about when she retired. When people retire, they they don't think the big picture, and they think, okay, I'm going to go to work for the hospital or something like that, work in security, or I'm going to go work at a casino or something like that and work security, or I'm just going to go work at some place, work security and make it, because that's what I've always done, is wear a uniform with a patch on the sleeve, and this is what I do. And there's so many more things that we can do as police officers or firefighters or first responders in general. But as police officers, that we can go and we can do more than just be security, because you have so much more, I don't know, in your brain than just standing at guard at a gate. And I think of it, and I'm gonna super nerd out here, so forgive me but um, if you ever watch Star Wars, and you see R2D2 is, he's got this huge, he's a robot that can do all sorts of calculations and fly ships, and he can, a whole bunch of different things that R2D2 is able to do because it's a supercomputer. Well, in Return of the Jedi, they take him and they put him in Jabba's sail barge serving drinks. So it's like it's taking this person that has this supercomputer in your brain that's able to do all these different things and multitask and super calculations and stuff, and then making them serve drinks or stand at a gate.
Mhm,
That's
mhm.
we're as law enforcement officers, as police officers, or we have this ability to be able to talk to people, to be able to multitask, to be able to do all these different things, have a whole bunch of different things on a plate. And then all of a sudden we're deciding, hey, I'm just going to go and stand at a gate. Well, because it's easy. And you've always just like, oh man, I don't have reports to take. I don't have, I don't have all these things I gotta prepare for court, and I've got to make sure I'm ready to go, and blah blah blah. But at the same time, you don't also have to you don't have to do anything, and you're so much more than that. And uh, with police officers, we get out of this profession actually fairly early in life. I mean, in our 50s, before 60s. Some of us go to till our 60s or whatever, but for the most part in our 50s. And we lose, you have a whole life still to live. And I think having that knowledge of other things that we can do and how to transition out of that is a whole different thing. But aside from just retirement, you're talking about people who have done the 10, 15 years and said, hey, you know what, I think I'm ready to go do something else now. And that's where you're talking about the transition at. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Or perhaps 5 years. We're having officers that signed up 3, 4, 5 years ago that are looking at sort of how that pendulum is swinging, and they're like, I'm running a race that I don't really want to be in anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They want to do something different. So that transition is really big. And from a psychological point of view too, having something to pour yourself into outside of law enforcement is important, because it does give you that thing to look forward to, that hope for your future. I've had a client who was very candid with me and said, I didn't save for retirement because I didn't think I would live this long. I thought I would kill myself way before I would reach retirement age.
Wow.
And he now is at retirement age and is a retired first responder. And he has a happy ending to his story. But, that psychology piece too, about just having a plan for the future, I think is huge, because it gives you something to look forward to outside of just the job that you're in now.
Yeah. So what are things that you help people do, as far as, do you help them find jobs? Do you help them change their mindset as far as what they're doing and how they're doing it, or what?
No. So Law Enforcement Connect helps them with the transition piece. I help with the financial coaching piece. So in a nutshell, I sort of help clients stop living paycheck to paycheck, become debt free, set up a exit plan if that's applicable to them. Sometimes it's rebuilding financially after a divorce, with the end goal of reducing stress around money. So some ways that I help with that is I develop an action plan. So I exclusively work with first responders and military, either current or retired, because those are the people that I want to serve. Those are the people that mean the most to me. But I do one-on-one coaching. We develop a personalized plan together, and then we make small steps, and we celebrate those small steps along the way so they can accomplish their financial goals. And that's different for everybody. But by and large, that goal setting, that debt elimination, and that stress reduction is what oftentimes helps people see the big result.
And so what is Law Enforcement Connect? What do they do as far as helping first responders and police officers?
Yeah, so they sort of serve as the conduit between a transitioning law enforcement professional into the civilian world. So, if they need help with resume writing, resume building, other resources, trying to find what their next step is going to be professionally, they sort of serve as the conduit for all of those resources that these law enforcement professionals can tap into.
And that's kind of cool, because you don't think about that as, you think, hey, I live in the regular sector all the time. I go to church, or I go to, things with my wife and her work, or whatever the case may be. And you don't think about, that life is different. And when was the last time you filled out a resume, that you completed your resume or updated your resume? because I know people who they said they'll say, man, it's been 15 years since I've filled out a resume because I haven't had to, because I mean, whether if you're not going for promotions necessarily for work,
Mhm.
and some places don't expect you to have a resume for your promotion or whatever. But if you haven't filled one out, you're looking at it like, what am I supposed to do? And then when you filled out your application years ago, it wasn't a resume necessarily. It was just an application, just like anything else. And so now everybody's looking at resumes and everybody wants, what do you got on your resume? And then how do you fill one out? If you're just a regular guy or girl, what's on a resume, and how is it laid out? What all do you include into it? And that makes a huge difference for somebody who doesn't really understand or think about that on a daily basis.
Yeah. Yeah. And that group is really great to help put your best foot forward. I don't know the first thing about resume building. That is not my wheelhouse, but the professionals that do help with this group, they do a really excellent job of putting that person front and center, looking the best that they possibly can. So they do a really great job.
Right. I was talking with a guy just yesterday, and he was asking, hey, what's your 5-year plan? I don't know. And he goes, do you have a resume? I said, I don't know. I don't have a resume. I guess I do. I can find one in, an old folder, but it's not up to date. It's a couple years old. And, there's a whole bunch of different things that included in that. And then a 5-year plan. I don't even think about a 5-year plan because, I mean, in this job, we don't think about that. We just think, okay, I'm going to go to work next week. And what I got planned for this next year, when I'm going to take a vacation or I'm going to do whatever. But yeah, that got me thinking. It's important that we do have a 5-year plan. We think about what we're going to be doing in that time frame. Additionally, we should have a resume. You never know, what's, updated, because what if you forget about stuff that that's important to have on there or something. And so, it's really important. And I think that what those guys are doing, what Law Enforcement Connected is doing, is super important for law enforcement and anybody in general, just so you have a knowledge of yourself, because it also takes things into perspective as far as, you think you haven't done anything in your career, and all of a sudden now you have this laundry list of things that you've done, and it can help you really take yourself, take a step back and take a look at yourself and realize who you are.
Yep, absolutely. It's all about a plan.
Yeah.
Plan with finances, plan with the future, all about a plan.
Yeah. So what are you doing now? You're doing all sorts of stuff. And I know you're a guest speaker at some places. And what are you doing now with all of this information that you're doing? Obviously, you're still working as a police officer, but you get to do a whole bunch of other side stuff. And what all is that?
Yeah. So I work my normal cop job, and then I teach for post police officer standards and training, and then STC, which is sort of the equivalent, but for the corrections side of things. Mm-hmm. So I teach subjects about, suicide by cop, law enforcement wellness, things that are prevalent today in the law enforcement world. Mm-hmm. Just to sort of tap into that intellectual wellness that our law enforcement professionals need to have to keep up to date with stuff. Right. So I do that. And then my financial coaching business, I do that on the side. And, when I have a moment to myself, I try to go horseback riding or spend time with my family, which I'm sure you can relate is hard. Sometimes that balancing piece is tough, but so needed.
Yeah, it's, it's important. And I think we lose touch. And like I said, having that hobby, it makes a big difference, because you got to have some reason. You got to have some reason to go do what you do. And, you got to answer your question, what's your why? And if you have a why, if you have, horseback riding, if you have, spend time with your family, getting pretzels, because you can get pretzels. You just got me on that pretzel. I want to go get a pretzel now. Thanks. But no, that's that whole thing where you know what you're doing, because your job, and I know guys in their early to mid 20s who are starting this career, and they their life is the job, and that's all they do, and that's all they think about, and they're grumpy, and you can't be that way. You gotta let it go, and you gotta have something else to do with your life. And if you can't do that, you're going to be struggling in everything that you do. And I don't care what even if your job is not, you're not a police officer, you're not a firefighter, you're not, whatever, you can still be doing something. You should still have something to do. And your job is not you. That is not your definition of you. Your job is not, it's an extension, I guess, because you still want to do the best job you can do, but you want to make sure you do other stuff. And so
yeah, absolutely.
I'm assuming that's where you are in your life with you want to have a reason to get up and continue on, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I want it to be purpose driven. It's great. It's great to go bowling, and it's, great to go golfing or whatever other people do. But I want my why, especially, to be purpose driven and intentional.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of why I do what I do on the side with first responders, is because of that.
Right. Yeah. It's important to have that. There's an intrinsic good to it, that you're helping somebody financially and get out of that position. And you can look back and say, hey, you know what? I'm glad I was able to help you do that. And they say, oh no, you did all the work. And I'm assuming your humility will come up and say, nope, I just pointed you in a direction, and then you can feel good about yourself.
That's right. I point them in the direction, and then they start walking. Yeah.
That's good. So what is on your horizon right now? What are you working towards? Because I know that you just started something recently within that last couple of days that's pretty important for you. But what else do you? I see you cocked your head, so maybe we're not going to talk about it. But what's on your horizon for the next, the next step in who Stephanie is, as far as speaking or financial stuff, or various things that you're doing right now with your life?
Yeah, no, the head cock was, which avenue is he taking this? Because I honestly do not know what he's referring to. Maybe that was my dumb blah moment. I don't know.
No, that's okay.
But that's a great question. And I, like probably a lot of us, haven't given a whole lot of thought into my 5-year plan, which I do need to do. I need to write that out. But I think in general, my biggest thing right now is family. I'm 7 months pregnant with my second. I'm trying to do all the things, which is great, but I think sometimes it's good to recognize that we go into different seasons, and my next season, at least for a short little bit, is to focus on family, because I am about to have our second boy due in March, which is coming up real fast.
Very cool. Very cool.
And, I really want to help as many people as I can outside of my cop job. So I'm linking up with some nonprofits in my area for first responders who are struggling, who are getting not only counseling and therapy from psychologists and other mental health professionals, but also need help with finances too. There's a lot of really great nonprofits in my area, but nationally as well, such as At Ease and the Veteran Project and all of these really great resources out there.
Yeah.
That I'm linking up with, because they see that there's a need to help people in this area.
Yeah, we've had Jeff McGreevy from At Ease International come on. He's a 10. He's an absolute 10. So,
yep.
I guess one of the things I was talking about was I guess you've been with Law Enforcement Connect for a very short time, and so I recently saw you mention something about having been, you're now an ambassador with them, and so. And that's what I was kind of going with, because it's very, very fresh, that
Yes.
whole thing. But you're also getting ready to be, you're going to be a guest speaker at a certain summit here, the Mint Ambition, correct?
Yeah, there's a really cool online event that's going on next week. And it's for anyone, not necessarily just law enforcement, anybody who is looking to leave a toxic job, toxic workplace, which we all know might encompass some police departments.
Sure.
And so I'm one of 28, 29 speakers. So there's a lot of breadth of knowledge of professionals come into this summit. So yeah, that Mint Ambition Summit is going to be a really great thing to a lot of people.
So that's pretty cool. And it's really pretty cool. So, I think you kind of encompass all this different stuff. And so, as far as you have this base of a law enforcement, you have knowledge of being in law enforcement. Your husband is, he's in the Marine Corps, and he's been in the Marine Corps for quite a while. Both your parents are law enforcement, you're law enforcement. You have this base of knowledge that can absolutely help somebody. And then you move into, you have this other knowledge of wellness and peer support and how to be there for somebody and help prevent suicide with people who are struggling to be in that world, and still try to maintain their semblance of normalcy. And they don't realize that the fact that they're reaching out sometimes, and we have to be able to reach out, and we have to be able to see those clues and those cues that they're putting out there. And so having that also, and then having this knowledge of personal finance and budgeting based off of your own shortcomings, your own struggle that you went through. So you have all these different things, and you are so willing to put that out there and give to somebody else. Where did this come from? This idea that, I need to help people and I need to do, where did that foster? I mean, aside from your parents being police officers, people don't just grow up and say, you know what, I'm going to give to everybody else and always put up for everybody else. There's something that, where did this come from? Or are you able to pinpoint that area?
I don't think you've ever been asked that before. I think it's from being raised by two police officers who, 99.9% of us in law enforcement are very moral and people-driven people that want to help others, right? So I think that does absolutely serve as a foundation. But I think it's a combination of my faith and seeing other people suffer. I don't want people to suffer.
Right.
And so if I can help in any way, shape, or form, then I'll absolutely do that. Especially our brothers and sisters in law enforcement, in fire, in EMS, military, because we're so quick, especially those of us in law enforcement, we're so quick to be willing to sacrifice our lives for the lives of strangers. So it's about time that someone is there for us. Someone is there to help the helpers. And I want to be that person. I want to help the helpers.
That's cool. And you're right. It is about time that somebody's there for us. And you, and along with a lot of other people who just care and that want to see other people, that want to serve other people, because it's what they figure God put them on this planet to do. And we there's a lot in our lives that could say, that could turn us one way or the other. And if we maintain that, even with all tragedy and stuff like that, that we maintain that solid foundation, that we go forward to help other people, it's never going to be, we're never going to lose that. And so that's positive. And I appreciate that. And I thank you for being who you are and doing that.
Thank you.
So where can people find you if they want to either get financial coaching, or they want to learn more about Law Enforcement Connect, or if they want to learn about some of the things you're speaking at, how can people find you and do all that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the easiest way to get in touch with me is through email. My email is firstresponse@gmail.com. And that's FIRST, firstresponse.financialcoaching.com. It's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me, the fastest way to get in touch with me. I do have my own website that people can check out that I can send to them as well. And as far as Law Enforcement Connect, they can check them out on LinkedIn. They can Google Law Enforcement Connect. They can go to lawenforcementconnect.com. Lots of different avenues, but yeah, I'm here. I'm an open book. I've got open arms to help our people, first responders, military. So anybody who wants to reach out, I'm here.
Perfect. And what was your website again?
So my website is ramseycoach.com/Stephanie Kiesow, KIESOW /coaching.
Perfect. And so they want to get in there, figure out, man, I need help figuring out my finances, or I need to figure out just how to make a budget or anything like that. They can go in and do that way.
I'm your gal.
Perfect.
Reach out.
Perfect. If you want to find out more about the What's a Hero podcast, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, and our website, which is the What's a Hero podcast.buzzsprout.com. And you can join the conversation. You can ask questions of any of our guests, and I can always go back and I get those folks. I can talk with them, or I can even invite them back on. People say, hey, I got more questions, and and that's great. And you can absolutely do that. I've got a number of people who have reached out so far, which is really cool. But if you want to talk to us, you can find me on LinkedIn, not the What's a Hero podcast, but me, and we can chit chat that way. And with the website, you can go on there, find every prior episode we've had. You can find our links to whatever favorite podcast platform you listen to it on. You can go in there, you can subscribe, you can download, you can then get a hold of us and listen to us and have us with you while you're doing whatever it is you're doing, whether you're out mowing the lawn or you're on a commuter train or whatever the case is. So you are welcome to download us and share us with all of your friends, and we will absolutely appreciate it. So Stephanie, do you have any final words of wisdom you'd like to share with everybody?
Get on a zero-based budget and don't fall prey to the shiny new toys once you start making money. Those are my parting words.
There you go. Those are words to live by. And I think it's super smart. So, so for Stephanie Kiesow, did I say it right?
Kiesow.
I'm going to try it again. For Stephanie Kiesow.
Yeah.
There we go. I have been Ken Frownfelter, and this has been the What's a Hero podcast. We are clear.